The Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, has released some secret documents about the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant from its archives. This is an unprecedented event for the so-called CIS countries and a very good step in the realization of what the Soviet authorities were like. Many of the documents in the archives concern the Chernobyl plant and the liquidation of the consequences of the accident in 1986. They confirm many conjectures, which were earlier speculated, that the plant was built with serious violations of technical regulations, that the real consequences of the accident were deliberately concealed by the authorities, which also prevented normal follow-up work, that the Commission had no accurate information about the condition of the reactor remains, and that the cleanup operation was largely an illiterate and unreasonable undertaking. In this video I will tell you what is included in these declassified documents and what horrible truth has been hidden from us for all these years. This video will be in two parts. This is the first part. On April 26, 1986, as a result of explosions, the fourth power unit, which was located near the Ukrainian city of Pripyat, was completely destroyed. Radioactive substances spread for kilometers around. More than 115,000 people were evacuated from nearby areas. Among the documents published are the very first report on the explosion, prepared by plant director Viktor Bryukhanov, as well as talks by plant operators at the time of the accident. Even 35 years after the terrible tragedy at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, unknown pages remain in the chronology of those events for most people. But millions of those whose lives were changed by the accident should know the truth, and the whole world should remember its consequences. The State Archive of the Security Service of Ukraine publishes secret KGB documents, the SSU said in a Facebook post. Moscow, May 9, 1986. At a press conference on the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, it was announced that radiation levels of up to 150 microrongen per hour were recorded on the border of the 30-kilometer zone on May 8. The book Chernobyl KGB Dossier, which until recently collected archival documents sealed as secret, published a reference of the Ukrainian SSRU KGB stating the real level of radiation. In the city of Poleskaya located on the border of the exclusion zone, the air radioactivity at that time was 3,100 microrongen per hour, and the soil 4,900 microrongen per hour, while in Kiev radioactivity in the air at various points ranged from 500 to 1,050 microrongen per hour. At the same time, the radiation background is safe for human health and amounts to about 20 to 30 microrongen per hour, up to a maximum of 50. The collection, published by the Institute of History of Ukraine together with the Branch State Archive of the Security Service and the Institute of National Remembrance, contains data that has not been published anywhere else. The book, which is more than 1,000 pages long, helps to reconstruct not only the picture of the tragedy itself, but also to understand exactly how the command and control system of the USSR worked, in which reports and assessment of events by special services became more important than expert opinion, and fear of the truth became stronger than fear for life and health of people. Here is a quote from a report for the 6th Department of the KGB of the Ukrainian SSR for the city of Kiev and Kiev region, 25 hospitals, referring to the directive of the Ministry of Health of the Ukrainian SSR. In the medical histories of patients with signs of radiation sickness indicate a diagnosis of vegetavascular dystonia. In the opinion of A.M. Klemenko, head doctor of the regional hospital, such a formulation of the question may subsequently lead to confusion when prescribing treatment, diagnosis, as well as deciding the issue of disability and establishing a pension. This diagnosis, vascular dystonia, is known to many residents of Kiev. Moreover, one could get a higher dose of radiation in the capital of the Ukrainian SSR at that time simply by going from a house in a less contaminated area, for example, to the lakes on the outskirts. The decontamination, according to archival documents, was done at night, as all this data was classified at the time. No one informed Kiev residents about these radiation spots. Just as they did not inform all residents of the USSR about the real radiation level during and after the accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. At that time the KGB of the USSR was more concerned with secrecy, as can be read in the archival documents of that time. What this care was expressed in is said in the report of May 15, 1986. The newspaper Pravda Ukraina published a positive interview about the situation in Kiev with a representative of a French travel agency named Rita in the documents. In general, the presentation of information only in a positive vein was concerned almost daily. Such interviews were aimed at showing how good everything was in the Soviet Union, that tourists could come to Kiev and not get sick, says Oleg Bazhin, the compiler of the collection of documents, historian. In almost every report on the situation after the Chernobyl accident, foreigners are given inordinate attention and energy, contrary to the need to save their own population. Members of the security services listened to and recorded daily conversations with foreign nationals who were in Kyiv at the time, mostly students and tourists, and regularly conducted explanatory work with them. This resulted in British students who were about to leave Kyiv suddenly deciding to stay, and in groups of foreigners who had come to study Russian, doubts were sown about the need to leave the city, even though embassies and reports in the Western media recommended the opposite. Many Muslim students, who studied mostly in technical fields in Kiev, believed that the Chernobyl accident was God's punishment. In a report dated May 30, we can read how Hadra Jaber, a student of the Kiev Civil Engineering Institute from Lebanon, spoke about the accident. God who punished the communists did it. The KGB had its own informants at various industrial enterprises and universities. These people were engaged in monitoring public sentiments. After the explosion at Chernobyl, 67 agents were engaged, who collected information to identify the real causes of the accident, but at the same time they were given the task to suppress panic rumors, dissemination of anti-Soviet statements. Therefore, there were people at the grassroots level who on behalf of the KGB were looking for, as they were called in the documents, chatterboxes, with whom preventive work was carried out. Twice a day, the district department of the KGB broadcast information about how many people incorrectly interpreted the party's policy and expressed their attitude toward what happened. Teachers and students were silenced, erased writings on the walls, and collected leaflets, which at the time Kievers left on the streets, eager to tell the rest of us what was going on. They also resisted the work of foreign journalists who collected the truth about Chernobyl and were not allowed to film in the exclusion zone. There is evidence in the documents of how strongly the KGB agents patronized the CBS TV crew, how they forbade the American embassy employees to take soil samples in Kiev and in the exclusion zone in order to understand the true level of radiation contamination. There were a lot of examples. There were manuals that said what you could talk to foreign journalists or scientists from abroad about. In these conversations, the idea had to be imposed that the cause of the explosion at Chernobyl was personnel error, not machinery or equipment. This was the main idea the KGB had to get across to people, says Bazhin. If you recall the trial that took place directly in the disaster area after the accident, as we now know exactly from the documents, so that the presence of Western journalists was minimal, the entire blame for what happened was placed on the plant workers. The version of design flaws in the RBMK reactor itself was considered in passing. At first, the staff negligence as the cause of the accident was the main focus of the IAEA report, which was based on the data provided by the Soviet Union. But later, even the International Atomic Energy Agency issued an updated report, which said that the plant staff was not aware that the reactor could explode under certain actions. Academician Valery Legasov, who was on the government commission investigating the causes of the Chernobyl disaster, and plant employees who believed the reactor design was the main cause of what happened, also spoke about this, as some of them said in court. Historian Oleg Bazhin calls the trial of those responsible for the disaster simulated. The KGB planted a so-called rooster in a cell with the director of the Chernobyl plant. This agent was supposed to influence Viktor Brukhanov so that he would testify in the right way. Each cell was bugged in order to monitor the mood of Anatoly Dyatlov, deputy chief engineer in charge of Chernobyl operation, one of the 6 people convicted in the accident case. The documents mention surveillance of the plant's chief engineer, Nikolai Fomin, who testified at the trial against his direct superior, Dyatlov. The agent's reports contain the opinions of a large number of people about what happened, which gives an idea of how total surveillance of Soviet citizens was. There are statements by professors and assistant professors at several institutions of higher learning, magazine editors, writers, doctors and hospital managers, locksmiths, and handymen. As a rule, these are disgruntled comments that it was not reported in time, that informing the population was belated, that kindergartens of the Central Committee and the Council of Ministers were taken out back on April 27, while our children are sitting, that if it were not for the West, we would still know nothing. At this time, special services employees find leaflets about the consequences of the Chernobyl accident, which unknown people leave in phone booths or simply scatter in the street. In the second part of the video, I will continue to familiarize you with materials of this terrible tragedy. If you're interested, thank the author by putting a like. And also do not forget to subscribe so as not to miss the outputs of even more interesting videos of my channel. Turn on notifications by clicking on the bell and share this video with your friends. What else interesting can you add to this video? Write in the comments, it will be interesting to read.